water. And today we're going to be talking about how to practice. A couple of important things to remember about practicing is that if you do it correctly, it can be a lot of fun and really productive. This is a trumpet. I'm going to be demonstrating practicing today, mostly in regard to the trumpet, but all of these rules can apply to any instrument. Singing, glockenspiel, xylophone, drums, violin, viola, spoons if you're into that kind of thing. When you're going to start practicing, the first thing that you need to think about is the space you're going to be practicing in. I personally prefer to practice in a practice room in the music building of my school, because if I'm going to be sitting around doing this, the people around my apartment might not appreciate that as much as I do. So first of all, it's going to be important to find a space where you're not going to be disturbing, especially if you're loud. It's also important to bring all of your necessary materials into the practice room when you go in there. You're going to want your instrument. You're going to want some handy dandy valve oil. And you're probably also going to want some water. And if you're a brass instrument player, chances are you're going to need some chapstick. Yeah, that's the stuff. There we go. Alright. Yeah. Now that you've successfully found an appropriate environment in which to practice your instrument, you're going to want to tune your instrument. If you're tuning a trumpet, like I currently am, you're going to want to know what a B flat is. So just keep in mind the note you need for your instrument. After you've decided what pitch you're using, you're going to want to play it on the piano or on a pitch pipe or on a handy dandy pitch pipe app so that you know what the note is. After that, play your instrument in an open position, which for trumpet here is going to be no fingers down, so that you can figure out how close to a B flat it is. Clearly my trumpet is not in tune. What you're going to want to do on any instrument is slide your tuning valve, which is what this magical object here is on the very end. Push your tuning valve in if your instrument is flat, and pull it out if your instrument is sharp. Basically continue that process until your instrument matches up with the pitch that you've chosen. Nailed it. The next thing you're going to want to do in your practice room is warm up. You're probably going to want to skip out on warm-ups very often, but I would advise against this, because that's basically like running a marathon without walking or warming up beforehand, and that is not okay. When beginning warm-ups, it's a really good idea to start with a breathing exercise before you actually play your instrument. For instance, what you can do is suck in air for 4 beats, and then breathe out on a S sound for 8 beats, and then continue increasing the amount of beats that you're breathing out on and decreasing the amount of beats that you're breathing in on.
3 days later.
After you've done some breathing exercise, you can go ahead and actually pick up your instrument. One of the most helpful warm-ups you can do, especially as a beginner, is slurs. On any instrument, that's where you modify your embouchure, but use the same slide position in order to get different pitches. It's also helpful to practice your scales and arpeggios when you're doing warm-ups. You may think these are a waste of time, but they're basically the foundation of all the music that you've ever played in your entire life, and will play for the rest of your life. So I think it would be a good idea to try practicing those, maybe for a little bit. After you feel sufficiently warmed up, you can move on to the body of your practice session. This can vary a lot depending on what you're working towards at the time, meaning that it would be really helpful for you to devise a practice schedule for this time period. You could be working on solo repertoire, ensemble repertoire, any number of things, and you need to make sure you account for all of those in your practice schedule. The only way this time in your practice session will be at all productive is if you make sure you take the time to go back and fix your mistakes. Mindless practicing will get you nowhere, according to everyone who's ever thought about practicing in an intelligent way ever. Mindless practicing means if you're going through your repertoire and not going back for any mistakes. If you are just going through the motions, you are practicing wrong. Anyone who's ever been successful at an instrument will tell you that it's important to take a break if you are tired. This is why it's important to make sure you allot enough time for this to happen, because if you're getting tired or you're in pain, you should stop. Continuing to practice when you're in pain would basically be like if you were hitting yourself in the face and wondered what to do to stop it. Ah! What do I do? Another way to have an extremely productive practice session is to record it and then go back and listen to it in the moment. You will sound a lot different to yourself when you're playing your instrument than you will if you were standing next to yourself and listening to yourself play your instrument. That didn't make any sense. Yes, it did. Okay. If you're recording yourself, it can help you to go back and fix mistakes that you may not have known were there previously, and then you could actually focus on sections that you need work on, rather than sections that you're good at, because why would you do that? During your breaks in your practice session, it can also be really helpful to listen to somebody else play your piece. Go and find a recording of the pieces that you're working on, and listen to another player. If you don't know what a good sound is supposed to sound like for any instrument, that's like throwing a dart without knowing where the target is. Man, I hope I don't hit a human being. And that would be dumb. If you're having trouble finding a practice time where you're not around other people that will be annoyed by you going on your horn or whatever you happen to play, you can always practice by just using your mind. And no, you don't need telekinesis to be able to do this. If you're at home, mom and dad are asleep, and you forgot to practice earlier in the day, you can still practice with your brain. Pick up your instrument and place your lips against your instrument, but don't actually make a noise. Just do the fingerings and practice your embouchure. The last nugget of practice advice I'm going to leave you with is to practice regularly. Even if it's just for 10 minutes on a day where you don't have a ton of time to practice, that can be helpful in the long run. Whatever you do in the practice room, make sure you practice smart, because practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Clearwater out!
Down on the corner, out in the street, playing the folk boys are playing, bring the nickel